Wyoming Territory, June 1884, the wind carried dust across the open land, stirring dry sagebrush and bending the prairie grass low as Nolan Merrick pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of the old Kessler homestead. The sun hung low behind him, casting a long shadow across the cemetery fence, and what he saw there hit him like a jolt to the chest. A girl, no, a woman knelt by a simple wooden cross, her hands brushing away the dust that had settled on the grave. Her dark brown dress clung to her knees, dirt smudged along the hem. She had tied her light auburn hair back with a fraying ribbon, but loose strands had escaped, sticking to her damp cheeks. Her lips moved, but he could not hear the words from where he sat his saddle. He dismounted slowly, boots soundless against the packed earth. His horse gave a soft huff, but the woman did not turn. Nolan stepped closer, hat in hand now. "I am not here to bother you," he said gently. She looked up fast, startled but not frightened. Her eyes were the color of the Platte River in spring gray-blue with something stormy behind them. "I remember you," she said after a pause. "You used to ride fence down near the creek. You are Merrick's boy." Nolan nodded. "Nolan, my folks kept a place south of here." "That was a long time ago." She looked back at the grave. "Not long enough." He stepped up beside her, glancing at the name carved into the cross. Thomas Kessler. The date below told him the man had died just last week. "I am sorry," Nolan said. The woman pressed her dirt-covered palm flat on the wood. "He worked this land near 30 years, never missed a season. I promised him I would keep the land alive." Her voice was steady, but her knuckles had turned white. Nolan looked out at the dry fields beyond the cemetery. The barn leaned sideways and the windmill no longer turned. "That is a big promise." She stood slowly, brushing her skirts off. "So is dying." He studied her closer now. She was maybe 22 or 23, shoulders square but tired, freckles scattered across her sunburnt nose. "I am Beatrice," she said. "Beatrice Kessler." He offered his hand. "Nolan Merrick." She shook it once, firm and sure. "You came looking for someone?" "No," he said. "I was just riding through. Something pulled me this way." Beatrice gave a small nod but said nothing more. She turned back to the grave, kneeling again, her hand resting on the dry earth. Nolan's eyes drifted toward the broken fence line, then the empty fields. "You have help?" "I hired a boy out of Cheyenne," she said. "He disappeared 2 nights ago." "Took the mule with him?" Nolan glanced toward the barn. "You have livestock?" 3 cows, one of them dry. "A sow, chickens if the coyotes have not taken them yet." "You cannot run a place like this alone." Beatrice tilted her chin. "I do not have a choice." Nolan looked at her again, really looked. The way she carried herself, grief tucked into her shoulders, stubbornness in her jaw. She was not trying to be brave, she just was. "I can help," he said. "I have strong hands and I know this land." She raised an eyebrow. "I cannot pay you. I am not asking for money." "What do you want then?" Nolan hesitated, then looked out across the land. "To be useful." Beatrice studied him. The wind picked up again, lifting her hair from her neck. After a long pause, she nodded once. "You can start by fixing the fence." He tipped his hat. "Yes, ma'am." Beatrice turned back to the grave. "And Nolan—" "Yeah, do not call me ma'am." By the next morning, Nolan had patched the northern fence and replaced 2 rotted posts. He found the chicken coop half smashed but still usable. Beatrice was already up, boiling water outside on a stove she had dragged into the yard. The inside of the house had burned partially last year and the kitchen was blackened and gutted, but she worked like it did not matter. He watched her coax a fire into life, her hair pulled tight this time, sleeves rolled up. She looked over her shoulder. "You eat?" "Not yet." "I have coffee and salt pork. That sounds like a feast." She gave the barest hint of a smile. They sat on upturned crates beneath the wide cottonwood tree. The coffee was bitter, the meat nearly burned, but Nolan had not eaten that well in weeks. "You always this quiet?" she asked. "I talk when there is something worth saying." She chewed slowly, then shrugged. "Fair." After breakfast, she went to milk the 1 cow still giving and handed him a list of things she needed from town. Nolan took her old wagon down to Rawlins and returned by dusk, with a sack of flour, nails, a new hammer, and a few extra things he figured she could use. When he handed her the small paper-wrapped parcel of peppermint sticks, she stared at it like it was gold. "My father used to bring me those." she said softly. "I saw them in the store, thought maybe you liked them." She looked up at him, her eyes glassy. "Thank you." That night they sat by the fire behind the barn. Beatrice watched the flames, knees pulled close to her chest. "My father believed in this land," she said, "even when it stopped believing in us." Nolan leaned back against a hay bale. "Do you?" She was quiet a long time. "Then, I do not know, but I promised him," he nodded. "Then so did I." She looked over at him. "You do not have to stay, I know." "Then why are you?" Nolan held her gaze. "Because you should not have to fight alone." Her eyes softened, but she said nothing. Instead, she reached into her dress pocket and handed him one of the peppermint sticks. He took it without a word. They sat like that until the stars came out, silent and side by side, the distance between them growing smaller. The days stretched long beneath the Wyoming sky, heat rising off the plains in wavering sheets by mid-morning. Beatrice moved with purpose, never lingering in one place longer than needed, and Nolan matched her rhythm without needing to ask how. Their footsteps fell into silent accord, lifting feed sacks, easing a calf out of a dry ditch, mending what could be mended. Late one afternoon, Nolan found her in the shed behind the barn, kneeling beside a rusted plow blade. Her hands were wrapped in linen, streaked with grease. She didn't look up. "That from the north field?" he asked, stepping around the door frame. "It caught on something last week," she said, voice low. "I thought maybe if I sharpened it, I could get one more use out of it." He crouched beside her. "Looks like it's cracked through." She wiped her brow with the back of her wrist. "I don't have another. I know someone over near Hannah, blacksmith named Harlan. He could fix this. I can't spare the wagon. I'll ride out tomorrow, take it on my saddle. Be back in 2 days." She finally met his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" Nolan leaned his forearms on his knees. "Because I know what it's like to watch a place slip through your fingers." Her shoulders eased just a little. "If you're going that far, I'll give you a letter. We've got a cousin near there. He's got seed we could trade for. I'll take it." Beatrice set the blade aside, pushing hair from her temple with a sigh. "We'll have to clear the creek soon. If the silt chokes it up again, we'll lose the back pasture. I'll help you before I go. There's a rattler den near the bend." He gave a quiet nod. "I'll bring a shovel." That night, while the wind whispered through the cottonwoods, Beatrice lit a lantern and brought it to where Nolan was oiling tack beneath the lean-to. The light caught the dust on her cheekbones, made her eyes look deeper set. "I stitched the lining in your saddlebag," she said, holding it out. He took it, surprised by the neatness of the work. "You didn't have to, I know, but it'll carry more this way." He ran a thumb over the new seam. "You always fix things you don't have to. I don't like waste." A pause settled, soft and full as dusk. She didn't turn to leave. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked. Her voice was quiet. "I did once. I was 17, got as far as Laramie. Spent a week in a boarding house over a bakery. Why'd you come back?" "My father sent a letter. Said he'd hurt his leg, couldn't finish the haying. I came back to help. By the time I got here, he'd already healed. But you stayed." "I didn't know how not to." He nodded slowly. "Some places don't let go easy." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You're not like the men who came before looking to stake a claim, then ride off once the ground got hard." "I don't ride off, Beatrice." She didn't answer, but her gaze lingered, and something between them deepened, not spoken, not touched, but present all the same. The next morning, Nolan left at first light, the plow blade wrapped in burlap and tied behind his saddle. Beatrice handed him the letter and a small cloth pouch of dried mint leaves. "For the road," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. He tucked it carefully beside the letter. "I'll be back before the moon changes." As he rode off, she stood by the gate, arms crossed, watching until the dust of his horse faded into the east. Then she turned back toward the pasture, alone again, but changed not in what she did, but in how the silence felt. That evening, the wind picked up, pulling an old shutter loose from the side of the house. Beatrice climbed onto a crate and nailed it back in place. She did not speak aloud, but her thoughts moved toward Nolan his steady way, the way he listened with his whole self. And though she would never admit it, she checked the horizon more than once the next day, waiting for a shape to rise out of it. Nolan returned on the third afternoon, his horse lathered. the repaired plow blade tied clean and gleaming behind the saddle. Beatrice had been up on the ridge, clearing debris from the dry stream bed with a long-handled rake. She caught sight of him coming over the rise, and though her hand paused mid-swing, she didn't call out. Instead, she set the rake down and waited. He dismounted without a word and unslung the blade, laying it across the porch rail. Dust clung to his collar and his right boot had a tear near the toe. "You make it to Harlan?" she asked, brushing her palms on the front of her skirt. "Aye," he said. "He's older than I remembered, but he still works like a forge fire." "Did he charge you?" "He did. But I traded him a coil of copper wire from my kit and patched a hinge on his smokehouse door. It squared us." She tilted her head slightly, assessing, but didn't challenge it. "Did the letter reach my cousin, Henry?" Nolan nodded. "He sent back a sack of barley and a tin of dried beans, said you favored those when you were little." She reached for the tin, expression unreadable. "He always liked remembering things I thought I'd forgotten." Nolan leaned against the porch post, his hat resting on the top step. "Harlan mentioned a rusted seed drill in his shed he doesn't use anymore, said we could have it if we haul it ourselves. He looked at her. "You and me." "If you want it." Beatrice glanced toward the barn, then back at the wide pasture beyond. "We'd need a team. We could ask around in Medicine Bow. I've got enough left in my pocket for a short lease." She ran her thumb along the tin's edge. "I don't like owing favors." "This isn't that," Nolan said. "It's just work if you want it to be." Her gaze rested on him longer this time. "And if I don't," he shrugged one shoulder, "then it's still yours. Either way, I'll stay as long as I'm welcome." The wind shifted, stirring the horse's mane. In the pause that followed, Beatrice turned toward the field and began walking. Nolan followed, his steps falling into hers. They reached the west fence line by late light. The tall grass there had grown wild, golden at the tips. She passed him a pair of fence pliers, then knelt to knot a length of wire around a leaning post. "You always know what to do with broken things," she said, not looking at him. He twisted the wire tight. "I've had plenty of practice. From where, my brother carved his name into our barn door when he was 12. My father made me sand it out by hand. After that, I figured out how to fix what got ruined before anyone else noticed." She tied off her end, then stood. "You have people still?" "No." "Not for some time." She didn't press. Instead, she walked to the next post, ran her fingers along the grain. "This land's full of ghosts." "I don't mind them," he said, "long as they leave room for the living." She looked over at him then, steady and quiet. "I've been alone a long time, Nolan. I don't know what it looks like anymore having someone stand beside you without walking off." He set the pliers on the ground and met her eyes. "Then let's figure it out, one fence post at a time." A hawk cried high above them as the sun dipped behind a line of cottonwoods. They stood there, neither moving, until the shadows grew long enough to reach their boots. And when they turned back toward the house, they walked the same path, step for step, as if it had always been that way. The rain came without warning. Not a downpour, but a slow, steady fall that softened the earth and brought the scent of wet pine drifting down from the hills. Beatrice stood near the edge of the north plot, sleeves rolled to the elbow, mud streaked up the sides of her boots. Nolan was beside her, his hat pulled low, water trailing off the brim. "We'll have to wait on planting," she said, voice low and even. "Soil's too soft for the drill." "We could use the time to dig out the root pile," Nolan offered. "That patch by the windbreak's still tangled." She nodded. "You ever pull wild chokeweed? Roots twist like rope." "I've fought worse," he said, stepping toward the shed for the spade. They worked until midday, the rain thinning to a mist. Beatrice peeled off her gloves and leaned against the fence rail, catching her breath. Her skin was flushed from the effort, damp hair clinging to her neck. "Why'd you leave your land?" she asked, not looking at him. "Fire took most of it when I was 20, he answered. "There wasn't much left after." "You didn't try rebuilding." "There was no one to rebuild for." She didn't respond right away. "I think about that sometimes. What happens to a place when there's no one left to care for it?" "You've got this one," he said. Her mouth tightened, but not with displeasure. "For now." They broke only long enough to eat cold cornbread and leftover beans beneath the open barn door. Nolan sat on a hay bale, sharpening the small hand scythe with a whetstone. Beatrice leaned back against the stall gate, her eyes on the field. "You ever been married?" she asked suddenly. "No, wanted to." He paused, stone mid-pass. "I did once. There was a girl in Sweetwater. She married a man with more cattle than I had." Beatrice didn't laugh, but the corner of her mouth lifted just barely. "Practical choice. She was kind," he said, "but she wanted a life that came easy. And you don't. I don't trust what comes easy." She considered that. "My mother died when I was 8, she said. She used to sing while she worked. I haven't heard a voice do that since." "You don't sing." I stopped when she did. He set the scythe down. "You ever think about what you'd want if the land didn't need so much? I wouldn't know where to begin. Maybe I'd learn to read music. Or take a train east, just once." "What's stopping you?" She looked up at the loft where the roof still bore scorch marks. "Responsibility." He didn't push further. Instead, he stood, brushed dust from his trousers, and reached for the yoke resting by the door. "Let's bring the cows in before the creek rises." That evening, the storm passed, leaving the air thick and still. Beatrice lit a lantern and carried it to the back porch, where Nolan was oiling the hinges on the storage chest beneath the window. "I found something," she said, holding out a small, leather-bound book. "My father kept notes in it, crops, weather, debts, but there's more, letters too." Nolan took the book and turned a few pages, eyes narrowing at the careful, slanted script. "He wrote to your mother, they're never sent." "Just pages addressed to her. I didn't know he did that." He handed the book back. "You want me to read them with you?" She hesitated. "Not yet, but maybe when I'm ready." The lantern light flickered between them, casting long shadows across the porch floor. "You think he'd want you to stay?" Nolan asked. "I think he'd want me to be honest about whether I'm staying for him or for myself. And I don't know yet." He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could hear the shift of his coat in the quiet. "You don't owe the ground your whole life, Beatrice." She looked up. "Then what do I owe it? Maybe just enough love to keep it honest, and someone to share the weight." She didn't answer, but her shoulders eased and she didn't step back. The lantern hissed softly between them as the wind picked up again. This time warm and carrying the scent of rain swept earth, and the faintest trace of something new. The barley came up slow but sure, rows of tender green catching the late summer light as the days shortened and the nights cooled. Nolan adjusted the old seed drill with steady hands, checking each gear with the care of someone who'd learned not to expect things to work the first time. Beatrice watched from the edge of the field, her arms folded, a wide-brimmed sun hat shading her face. "You trust that thing?" she asked. "No," he said, tightening the last bolt, "but I trust what we're putting in the ground." She stepped closer, soil clinging to the hem of her skirt. "I never thought I'd see anything grow again out here, not like this." "You didn't quit," he said. "That's what makes it grow." Her eyes flicked toward the barn, its roof patched now with salvaged tin Nolan had hauled from an abandoned claim east of Medicine Bow. "I don't think I would have made it through this summer without you." He stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "You would have. But I'm glad you didn't have to." She looked at him then, studied him the way she might study a shifting sky, wondering what it might bring but not afraid of it anymore. "I was thinking," she said quietly, "of planting squash along the southern fence next year." He nodded. "Soil's warmer down there, it'd take. I'd need more seed. I'll ride to Hannah again when the snow thaws." She didn't answer right away. "Then, I'd like it if you stayed through the winter." He stepped in close enough to see the sun-flecked green in her eyes. "I meant to." Beatrice lowered her gaze, then lifted it again. "I've got an extra room. It's small. Roof doesn't leak anymore." "I don't need much space," he said. "Just a place you want me." She reached for his hand then, rough from work, sun-darkened. Her fingers fit against his like they'd been waiting for that moment. "I do." They stood like that for a long time, until the wind turned cool and the sky shifted toward dusk. No more words passed between them, but something settled quiet and sure, like a fence post driven deep into solid earth. By October, the cows were putting on weight, the dry one nursing again after a long spring. Nolan built a smokehouse beside the shed, and Beatrice cleared out the last of her father's tools, finding places for each one on new hooks he'd carved from cottonwood. They moved without ceremony or hesitation, passing tools, sharing meals, mending what needed mending without dividing the labor between his and hers. One evening, as the first frost dusted the porch rail, Beatrice came home from the field to find the inside of the house swept clean and a new iron stove warming the front room. "I sold the extra tack I wasn't using," Nolan said, watching her eyes travel the space. Had enough left for the stove. She stepped over the threshold, fingers grazing the stove's edge. "It's warm." "I want this place to feel like home for you," he said, "not just something you're holding together." She turned toward him, something steady and certain in her face. "It already does." He kissed her then, slow and without urgency, like he was claiming nothing but offering everything. She leaned into him, her hand slipping to the back of his neck, and for the first time in years, her chest didn't feel tight from holding too much in. Winter settled over the land with soft silence. Snow piled against the barn doors, and the creek froze clean through. They shared the work. He chopped wood while she tended the root cellar, and when the wind howled long into the night, they read her father's letters aloud by lantern light, her voice steady, his hand always resting near hers. One night, as the snow fell thick beyond the windows, Nolan reached into the chest beside the hearth and pulled out a small, folded bundle of linen. "I traded for this last time I was in town," he said, unwrapping it to reveal a simple silver ring. Didn't want to ask until the time felt right. Beatrice looked from the ring to his face. "I want this land," he said, "but only because I want you." She took the ring without a word, slid it onto her finger, and then pulled him close, pressing her forehead to his. "You already have me." They were married in late January, under the open sky behind the barn, with the cows lowing in the distance and the cottonwoods bare and tall. A neighbor from 3 miles off, old Mr. Leland spoke the words, and afterward Nolan kissed her with both hands in her hair and her breath caught between them. The snow began to melt come March, and the barley stirred again, green tips reaching through thawed soil. Beatrice kept a journal now in a small book Nolan had carved a cover for. It sat by the stove beside his tools, her pen resting where she'd left off. By April, a crib sat by the window in the front room, hand-built, the wood still smelling of pine. The child wasn't due until summer, but Beatrice ran her fingers over the smoothed edge each evening, her other hand tucked into Nolan's where it rested on her stomach. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered once, her eyes half closed in the firelight. "You earned every bit of it," he said. The wind still came across the plains, and the work never stopped. But the house held laughter now and warmth, and a kind of peace that hadn't touched it in years. They lived each day with hands in the dirt and hearts turned toward each other, not seeking perfection, only something honest, something shared. And in that wind-worn corner of Wyoming, where the land had once threatened to take everything, it gave something back instead, a life built slow but strong, and a love that held through every season.